Check. Yeah, it's working. We're in business now, baby.
We're in biz.
All right. First off, I took issue with this. He said, the first among the sarcastic critics of Hegel's notion of monarch is none other than Marx. Is that true? Schopenhauer called him a flat-headed charlatan mystic before that.
Well, Marx is very sarcastic in his writing. Maybe that was... Maybe he was referring more to the tone. I mean, the link just...
Wait, more than a
critique.
flat-headed charlatan mystic? Wait, what did he write exactly? Okay. Hegel, installed from above by the powers that be as the certified great philosopher, was a flat-headed, insipid, nauseating, illiterate charlatan. I don't know that you can call Hegel illiterate. Like, of all the things. Anyway, illiterate charlatan who reached the pinnacle of audacity in scribbling together and dishing up the craziest mystifying nonsense. This nonsense has been noisily proclaimed as immortal wisdom by mercenary followers and readily accepted as such by all fools, who thus joined into as perfect a chorus of admiration as had ever been heard before. Who do you think that was, Victor?
I don't know.
You're saying that's not Marx.
Nah. Come on, guys. It's Schopenhauer.
Well, Schopenhauer was pissed off because Hegel was doing like lectures across the hall from him, and Hegel was getting all the
but that would have been
students.
Before Marx, right?
That sounds and is personal.
But it's still a sarcastic... I think Zizek doesn't want to give any props to Schopenhauer because of how he feels called out for it. I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, I mean...
Oh, actually, maybe Marx was... Let me check this. Maybe Marx was first.
This is 1843, is a contribution to the critique of Hegel's philosophy of right.
That would have been... Yes, that would have been 1843 because World as Will and Representation volume, or edition 2, actually came out 1 year later in 1844.
Oh, so Marx beat him to the punch.
Marx's critique was never published in his life, was it? I don't think so.
The publishing record of Marx's works is a mess. It says it was first published in 1844 in the Deutsche Französische Jahrbucher. So it was published, this one.
Okay. So Marx was first. We're not gonna ride through Zizek's article and nitpick. But it is a fitting opening because you know what all the good theorists agree on is Hegel.
Mm-hmm.
Schopenhauer, Marx, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Adorno, Horkheimer, Derrida, Deleuze-Guattari. It's just Hegel, right?
Even Schelling.
Oh, Schelling,
old roommate.
Do you think that people feel? What do you think the energy is stronger, Hegel or Kant?
I don't know. Who hates Kant?
All the new materialists and object-oriented ontologists and speculative realists, they don't like Kant. They call it post-Kantian philosophy. They think Kant opened up the chasm between the subject and the object and like landed us in this sort of Cartesianistic two worlds.
Maybe I'm too much of a phenomenologist because the Merleau-Ponty doesn't like Kant.
If the objection were like the mind-body dualism thing or subject-object binary thing, wouldn't Descartes, the Descartes energy would be stronger than
Kant? The Descartes energy is probably stronger. All right, I'm just saying there's a lot of Kant energy in phenomenology, I think. But...
Like, we know Deleuze hated Hegel. That's I think post-structuralism tends to not be such a fan of Hegel. And Hegel was out of, there was the post-Kantians in the early 20th century. Hegel was kind of out of fashion for a long time. And then he started getting brought back in by like Charles Taylor, good old Canadian philosopher, and
he was out of fashion for a while.
And some of those liberal philosophers started kind of reinterpreting Hegel, spirit of the community type stuff.
And Zizek had a lot to do with that as well. I think Zizek made it cool when it was definitely not cool.
Well, I mean, obviously Hegel had a huge impact on continental philosophy. The umbrella term usually involves a bunch of philosophers who are reacting to Hegel, and I would say that whereas Hegel, especially when it comes to the Anglo-American tradition, that even in England there was a time when Hegel the British idealists were like kind of systematizing Hegel in like the 1920s and 30s, I think. And then,
Yeah, was it like F.H. Bradley?
yeah, exactly. And then everyone, and
And
then
then
they all got
Hosea
ousted.
Royce from America.
And then they all got ousted by like the Bertrand Russell types who came in and kind of changed Anglo-American
The
philosophy.
linguistic turn and the logical turns and those sorts of things kind of
Because they were definitely saying Hegel.
put Hegel out of biz.
Karl Popper was big on the Hegel train too.
A lot
Wasn't
of
there a
young
competition
Hegelians.
between like Hegel's logic and like Frege logic? Wasn't that the split?
I don't think there was a competition. Hegel's logic was just kind of excoriated.
I guess what we're trying to say is Hegel was getting, I guess, pig roasted on all sides, from all corners of philosophy.
Spit roast.
You know what I gotta say? I'm willing to jump on the train, but I think if you have that quality of haters from across the board, you had to have done something right.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. It's like the highest compliment. There's like you can't do any of this stuff without paying homage or enmity to Hegel.
You know what I should say? We it's a little late. We shouldn't say in whatever it is the first 7 minutes of an episode because it'll get tagged as explicit. So, for all the people all the bad parents who are listening to us with their kids in the car, we don't want them to hear the word but it's too late.
I was going to say I mean, I actually thought we were going for that because when you get the explicit tag, that's when you know it's good, and that's when you're going to get the clicks that you want.
That's
we got to get on
punk rock.
The banned book list in the Vatican, the banned podcast.
Hey, kids in the back of the minivan, hope you're doing well. We could get our other fucks out of the way now that the dam's broken.
God, could you imagine? Do you think there's anybody who listens to our podcast with kids in the back seat? That's crazy to think about.
World's best parents or world's worst?
And the kids aren't paying attention to a tablet back there.
Yeah, they're sitting watching that stupid dog show, Paw Patrol propaganda.
Yeah, that's true. They're probably watching on a tablet, but it's just
imagine when the kid gets old enough, like, Mommy, Daddy, what's Hegel? What's Geist?
Better roll down the windows, kids. I just let out a big Geist.
What's a pig roast?
What's a spit roast? Tell you when you're older.
We forgot a fuck you last week. Fuck you, York University. We forgot to say that last episode, but a sincere fuck you from us.
Oh yeah. They leapfrogged the lineup and called the cops right away. U of T is waiting for an injunction to come through the court system. York was just like, nah, call the cops.
They had the riot gear. I think York University Magazine is writing something on us. Are they writing something on us?
Yeah. And they might be. It depends if they listen to the last couple episodes.
Well, let's just get this out of the way with the tail that wags the dog. Fuck you, York University, and your magazine.
Well, okay, that's fascinating. Actually, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So I didn't know. Did they come in with riot gear at York? I had no idea. I'm like so out of touch.
Oh yeah, it was up for like one day, and then like there's like 40 or 50 cops in riot gear, just like sweeping through the place where you get off the subway. That's where they occupied. Yeah, like 40 cops, riot gear came through. And then they were saying afterwards, then they brought in like a crew and started like removing people's shit.
Oh, wow.
Paw Patrol is bad, you kids out there.
Yeah. Basically like taking stuff people left behind. And there were like 3 arrests. And then York said they peacefully left. It's like, oh, that sounds
There's no more.
peaceful.
There's no more encampment at York.
Well, there was immediately a huge rally afterwards.
Yeah.
Is it restarted? I don't know. I'm on summer. I'm not there. I think they did like a day rally to protest that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're going through the legal system. The email that the president of University of Toronto sent to us. I don't know. I wonder if the legal framework is different. I wonder if like the conditions of the land, the U of T land's a lot older and it's been like in downtown Toronto for a long time. So I don't know. I'd just be curious because I don't think that U of T is doing that out of the kindness of their heart.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
think that, right?
Because they're conservative. I would say they're a more conservative university. Like, I would say that there's way more moneyed interests at U of T who would not want, like, who would be very against. Obviously, like, I mean,
I think it's
it. Like,
just
there's
there's
obviously a lot of Jewish There's a lot of Jewish donors at U of T and York, I'm sure, right, who are not comfortable with the Palestinian protests and the encampments. So I know for a fact that they're fucking pressuring both universities. So that's why I'm just wondering why U of T is taking such a legal route.
I think it's the same. I think it's U of T there's a lot more people there, and there's also a big, huge fucking fence around the encampment. York had a lot less, and it was just wide open. Like, and the cops have had lots of practice with this, walking through, public parks, kicking all the homeless encampments out. So they just basically use the exact same tactics. With U of T, it'd be more complicated because they'd have to scale the fences. The fences, ironically, that U of T put up to keep people from doing it because they had some premonition, but then the occupiers got in there anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I assume they put that in after to kind of keep it from growing anymore or something. But then obviously people must be coming and going. I don't know how.
Just for the listeners here, York has kind of a reputation, particularly because of the SPT department. It has kind of a reputation as a left-leaning university, whereas U of T is more conservative, bigger endowment, downtown. So
older.
You'd expect York to, not just pay lip service to rights of expression and things like that, but York just got rid of the protesters immediately the next day.
No, they're the same from an administrative perspective. They're the same ideologically. It's just York has, SPT, which is Marxist, humanities.
Well, I mean, they have a bunch.
Postmodernist.
I mean, York does just also have like a lot of their departments. A lot of the university was founded in like the 1960s era, and like came from a lot of very progressive ideas about alternative education. Like the department, I did my master's there in environmental studies, and that department has like a very strong history of like alternative education. And I think to this day, at least when I was there, I mean, I guess it's been a while now, in their master's program, they didn't even give you a letter grade. It was all qualitative feedback. So like it was,
so it's some Montessori shit, and now it's just
basically some anti grades.
We know to keep going down here. This is just the wings of neoliberalism. Any credibility that York has,
but it's a good segue talking about protests.
Yeah,
maybe like a good segue
for the content today. We did our once a year or so check in with Zizek, because Zizek, what's he up to? What's he doing? And immediately, as a soft-handed woke scold that I am, I of course got very triggered. Saw the title of the article, already had my virtuous tweets against him ready to go because he wrote an article in defense of monarchy. So add that to the list of sins.
Well, last time we read an Zizek article, if I recall, I believe we all agreed that we loved it.
What, when he was nuancing the trans?
Oh yeah, the trans lobby one. Yeah, that was.
Oh yeah,
great. Great.
Yeah, that got us some real likes on that one. Yeah.
Okay, so we're now going from big trans and their dangerous lobby to big monarchy, which is a less threatening lobby.
Monarch's got a monarch.
I was conditioned because we read Moldbug a few weeks ago, so I was like, "What the fuck is this?"
But you fucking loved. You loved Moldbug.
Did I?
You were so seduced by his craziness.
Can you get this right? I said I liked him relative to Rufo. I also prefer pubic lice to herpes, but I wouldn't say I love pubic lice. But let's just say Zizek's in a mood. And I'm going to also say it's kind of our mood. He recently wrote a book on the end of the future, I think like last year. We've been focusing on the end of the future. It's a vibe. It's a vibe that's going around.
This article really felt like I was walking right into the middle of a conversation that I didn't know was happening. And he's also defending Hegel's take on monarchy. So I don't know what the heck. I'm not well versed in this. I know there are right Hegelians, but is that what right Hegelians are about? Is Hegel's defense of monarchy? Clearly not, if Zizek is also doing it, but I mean, it seems like a kind of reactionary political outlook.
I think right Hegelians just say something like Geist is happening, and as long as the smartest, whitest people are in charge of it, then it's okay.
Well, I think there's an emphasis on the state in right Hegelianism.
Yeah.
Definitely not. I mean, this take isn't like that. So somehow the monarch is supposed to weaken the state in this situation.
Well, yeah.
Presidents apparently have more power than monarchs in this imagination here. But yeah, this is a leftist defense of Hegelian monarchical political views.
Well, his author's bio still says Slovenian Marxist philosopher, but Marx has yet to make an appearance, at least in this article, and kind of for a while.
No, there's just the sarcastic critic.
Yeah, the only mention he makes about communism is the Polish jokes about why communism sucks.
Yeah, which is Polish communism is something that Zizek came of age around Eastern European communism.
So yeah, in lieu of an argument there, seriously, for me, it was actually nice to see Zizek making a solid textual argument, though, because I felt like, it's been a couple of years, and I haven't read everything he's published, but it feels like in the last couple of years, he kind of took a break from textual arguments, and he's off talking about something Hegel said and Lacan said without the actual references. But here, he went straight grad student style, cited his sources, and it's there to see. So impressions, questions, is this written for anyone in particular? Is there a real connection between the content and the, I don't know, potentially rage bait title, if it is that? I thought this was kind of up your ass, Victor. I don't know why I said that. This is up your alley, Victor.
Up your rear back alley.
Up your back alley.
This seemed like, that's why I said this seemed like a conversation that I was walking into the middle of, because he's clearly, like, the first half of the article, the driving force of the article is him addressing this guy, Klaus Feuweg, who's a German writer. He wrote Hegel, the Philosopher of Freedom, a well-reviewed biography of Hegel. And the next book, The Idealism of Freedom for Hegelian Turn in Philosophy. And the first one was 2019. That one I just mentioned was 2020.
You got to Google image search Klaus Feuweg, because he looks like exactly halfway between David Bowie and Hegel himself.
Yeah. So he's arguing against this guy's take on Hegel's deduction of monarchy, as he calls it. So this is also a very abstract argument, and it involves Hegel's logic, which I have read some of, and
no, it is the fake logic,
small one.
Well, there's the short logic, and then there's the grand logic, or the long one, or whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, they're both. He rewrote the long one, at least the first bits of it, till the end of his life. He didn't have time to rewrite all of it. And then I think the encyclopedia, the short logic, was a more like a student primer / popular version of the longer bit. So it's all connected. It's not like it's all disconnected. But yeah, there's this syllogistic deductive argument about monarchy. It's very abstract.
Yeah, years ago, I put my best foot forward, taking a go at the encyclopedia, got through it, got a decent grasp of it, but this reminds me of a trying time in my life. But for the listener's sake, we can summarize this, and I could try unless one of you guys wants to have a go at it. Don't take this as gospel. This is based on memory. But I'm not going to read the first half of the first third of the encyclopedia just to check Zizek's notes.
No.
But if we can say, okay, what's the monarchy? What's the purpose of the monarchy in this in the syllogism? There's a bunch of types of syllogism. I don't remember them all. He only mentions one here, which is the syllogism of necessity. And if I'm remembering correctly,
and the disjunctive syllogism.
I think that's a subcategory of this one. And I'm just saying
that was the second one. That was the one the argument focuses on in this article, is the disjunctive syllogism.
Okay, so it's either its own kind of syllogism or it's a subcategory of another kind of syllogism. Comments Hegel bros, just chill out, okay? This is not that important. I know it's the only thing you care about, but just for now,
Is there
chill
some
out.
logic bros out there?
But the syllogisms, they're a type of judgment, and there's, I think, two types of judgment. There's immediate ones and mediate ones, and the syllogism is immediate in the sense that it combines universals and particulars in different ways. So there's like, I don't, 4 kinds, 3 kinds.
It's like the UPS, the Postal Service, universal, particular, singular.
So we got some particulars and we got some universals, and they're combined in syllogisms. And this particular one, which sounded pretty foreign to my ears, but I'll run it past you. The monarch mediates as actualization or a particular of the universal, which is the people. So the monarch is the actualization of the universal people. He himself is the people's decision making. Now, Hegel doesn't put any of these things together. This is Zizek using Hegel's logic to put them together, when Hegel has actually a lot else to say about monarchy and people elsewhere. This is just using the logic, which doesn't have anything to do with these specific examples. But I guess if I can boil it down, why do the people need a monarch to make decisions? And that answer is kind of easy, because it's the problem with all political systems. You need the people involved, but you can't ask all the people what they want because there's just too many of them. So even if you could go up to each one and ask, what do you want? And you did like a referendum or something, then you're still only going with majority decision and then calling the majority a universal people's decision. And it's not universal because some people voted the other way. But anyway, ultimately, the problem is who's making a decision. We can't just do this namby-pamby decision-making process. Not everyone's an expert. We need a streamlined decision-making service, and the monarch is going to function in that way.
Yeah. And then the 3 branches of government. The legislative represents the people. The executive carries out or enforces the decisions that are agreed upon. And then you don't really have the judicial. You can kind of stick the king or the monarch there in the judicial. So you have the 3 sort of branches, and the king is supposed to like almost mediate between, the people and the decision-making process. I don't know if I need to go that far with it, but
Victor,
was I wrong?
Can I ask you something?
Okay.
We don't have this tripart division between judicial, legislative, executive, do we? Is that specifically an American thing, or does it go back to some political theory?
no, that comes from the French. That comes from the French Enlightenment. It was like
many countries
like
have
Montesquieu. Is it Montesquieu is one of the early?
We have judicial independence in Canada, but the difference here is that the executive and the legislative in British Westminster systems like Canada and Australia are fused because you have a cabinet of ministers who are chosen from the House of Commons, which is the legislative branch. So in Canada and the UK, the legislative and the executive are kind of fused, whereas in the States, they have the executive separated where you have a distinct president and he chooses his cabinet who's random people. They can decide whoever they are, and then they have to get confirmed by the Senate.
And was the States, were they the first people to do that?
I mean, there were ideas, but I think the US was the first to actually have 3 like fully separated powers.
Yeah. Executive, legislative, judicial. That was like the full one. But in Europe, it was often mixed because they would have the constitutional monarchies.
Exactly.
And so
exactly.
the role of the monarch would often be, I think a judicial and sometimes linked to the executive, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know that much about judicial history, but but I think it's true that like pretty sure like lords would sometimes also be judges. So it's like, yeah, so there's like some, but I don't know enough about the history of British judicial.
As Foucault teaches us, sovereignty is the power to kill. And that's the role of the sovereign. But the people need representation.
Going back to Zizek's vision here, though, like was it not my understanding that he did like kind of say that ideally or maybe this was when he was quoting other people talking about Hegel's account of monarchy, that like ideally the monarch wouldn't really make that many decisions because, you know, these other branches would be making decisions, and it's only when there were like these difficult decisions between, I think what he calls like, where whatever choice you make is going to be arbitrary, then you need like a monarch to make that decision, because it's like, what's the difference between these two things? And it's like there's maybe disagreement, so you need a decider. But otherwise, it's like you can have these other systems just running, as long as they're running smoothly and they're being decisive, then that's all that matters. And it seems to be that like the monarch is there to be decisive when you need a decision.
Yeah, so the example we get of that, right? Yeah, you got that right. Yeah, the monarch is supposed to simply make a decision among a bunch of options that have been whittled down, and all the options are basically sort of equally as good. And that's the job of the members of the monarch's council is supposed to, you know, be chosen by objective criteria. So they're experts, right? They would be experts. Without the monarch, they'd be like technocrats. But with the monarch, they're like the council of the king or the queen or whatever. So these members say the example here is prisons are overcrowded. So the members of the council figure out a bunch of different solutions to this. And Zizek is quoting someone named Mark Tunick here, saying, you know, okay, one is to kill them all. Another one is to build a new prison. Another one is to reduce sentences. Another possible solution is just to sort of let the new criminals go free and not charge them with anything, or think of some other punishment other than jail time, blah, blah, blah. All these options. So they whittled them down to a basic set of options that don't say, you know, conflict.
Like you can't kill them all in a liberal democracy. So
yeah.
we'll just
So
cancel that one
proportional
out.
punishment, for example, you know, punishment has to be proportional. It comes from the French Revolution. I don't know what the Germans did with that one, but anyway, yeah, you have to punish wrongdoers, so you can't just let them go. So yeah, they whittled them down to a bunch of options that are essentially equally as good. And at that point, if you didn't have a monarch, there'd be no decision made, because the idea is like, well, then I guess if it just comes down to whatever interests are represented in the council, then they're all just going to argue for their sort of favorite solution. And the king is going to be, or the pressure will just kind of go, it'll be like the Buridan's ass thing, right? Where like it'd be impossible. They're all equidistant. So the monarch makes an arbitrary decision and just says, go with that one.
And it is kind of arbitrary because we're assuming, as we've said, we kind of had this debate in monarchy with Moldbug. Like, monarchs are idiots. You have no guarantee that they're going to be beneficent. They might be drunks. They might be retarded. You don't know. But the point is, someone's there to make the decision, and this is basically equivalent no matter which way you go. And even if the guy's an idiot, that's okay, because it reflects the populace, which is also mostly idiots anyway. not a very compelling case, maybe.
Quote. So when the quote he gives here to summarize this says, Hegel is not a. This is Zizek quoting Mark Tunick. Hegel is not a Democrat. He's a monarchist, but he wants monarchy because he does not want strong government. He wants to de-emphasize power. He develops an idealist conception of sovereignty that allows for a monarch less powerful than a president, end quote. And then Zizek says, less powerful than a democratically elected president would be. So that's the role of the monarch, is just to be a sort of decision maker, a kind of useful idiot, a kind of near the end, it's like a common person just elevated to the role of monarch, and Zizek kind of just throws in near the end that it would have to be chosen by lottery. The way he says, the way to reinvent something like a king today should definitely include a moment of lottery. It should be left to chance. So we have a kind of lot system, but not for public servants or anything like that, for a monarch.
Yeah. So
Chosen
We
look,
did
by
look,
say
I don't
he did
want
say
to.
we could have some deliberative democracy lottery, but yeah.
We're rushing straight to the end. So thank you for that,
Well,
Eric. But
I just thought that was the horseshoe there.
I have to give Victor his chance to say his piece here. Because, first of all, is this monarchy? And second of all, you've talked about something like a lottery system that is actually more democratic, because if you introduce this element of chance, it's harder for the political system and the institutions to be beholden to like external interests, corporate interests, etc. So what did you think of
Yeah,
this whole
fair.
jump from we need it doesn't matter who they are. We don't need a philosopher king. We just need a decision maker at the end point so that when they're presented with a decision, something actually gets done.
Yeah, I mean, I find something intuitively appealing about that. But I mean, the account is not very fleshed out in this article about like exactly how it would work. I mean, he says some stuff, and he's obviously fusing it with this kind of defense of the Hegelian account that I'm not really sure how to comment on because I don't know it that well. But in general, yeah, I mean, I find that a lot of the frustration with the fact that things don't change is like somehow like decision paralysis or like what they call in political science like path dependency, right? Where like, you know, one chain of institutional decisions lead to so many others, but then it just becomes dependent on that path and it's really hard to get off that path. And it's like, would it be nice to have something in the system that can be like, no, we're actually going to do this now. Like, fuck that. That's like appealing. There's something appealing about that. And yeah, and then in general, like on the lottery thing, I mean, yeah, like you're right. I'm a big fan of using lottery. In my dissertation, I talk about how I would want, you know, a system that uses lottery, but that kind of fuses like an electoral chamber and a lottery chamber. And I would want actually, you know, it's kind of interesting because here he mentions at the end of the article, something about, you know, could deliberative democracy help and use popular assemblies that are composed of, you know, selected by lottery? And he's like, yeah, it could help, but it has to be sustained by a clear structure of decision, right? And then he mentions the key point is that deliberative assemblies don't decide. And that's true right now. But I would actually want deliberative assemblies that are chosen by lottery to be empowered to actually make decisions. So in my ideal model, kind of, I would want an elected chamber like we have now, like in the House of Representatives or the House of Commons, that that would maybe still have party politics, but they would only be allowed to set the agenda. So they could basically be like, okay, like we need to do something about pharmaceutical drug prices, or like we need to do something about prison sizes, right? And then it would go to the deliberative body of randomly selected people, and then they would be presented with a bunch of testimony from experts about like the pros and cons, and then they would get to decide what to do. And I do think that that kind of insulates the decisions that get made, because to me, like the thing that makes electoral democracy bad is that you get all this it gets infected by moneyed interests, and like, so where like decisions that get made are influenced by like a bunch of these wealthy interests. And I think if that could be insulated,
Yeah, and like
where the people who
fundraising
actually get
and
to make the
stuff.
decision are like a collection of ordinary people, then maybe you could actually decide on what's going to be the most likely to solve this problem.
Like a jury for a murder.
Exactly, but it would be like a jury, a policy jury of ordinary
12
citizens.
angry men.
So anyway, but like that's maybe a bit off track, but I guess like this question of just like how are we going to make a decision about what to do? Like I agree with him in the sense that there's a problem there. Like how are we going to make a decision? Because right now it just seems like decisions are bogged down by like institutional like freeze and path dependency, and then moneyed interests and all these other interests that like don't want to have the courage to make a difficult decision. So like, yeah, I guess like hypothetically, could it be like some monarch who would be there to make the decision? I guess, but that doesn't seem to me to be the best idea.
It's like a one-member jury.
Yeah, it's like a one-member jury. It's weird.
The idea here is like all the options will be good because the council of the monarch is chosen by objective criteria. So there are a bunch of different. I'm not sure what the objective criteria. Again, it's not telling me in this article, but I assume so. They're all experts, so we can be sure that the options presented to the monarch are going to be, the best options that the best minds could come up with, and then they're all sort of equally as good because they don't conflict with, thou shalt not kill, criminals must be punished, whatever. So then it's just arbitrary. And then so the monarch just makes the arbitrary decision. So it's a groundless decision based on a bunch of grounded options. And so
Yeah.
it just cuts the Borromean knot, basically.
I think the analogy to like criminal trials is pretty good here because, you get your side's expert witnesses or expert testimonies, then the other side can grill them if they choose to. And then you grill them both ways and you try to eventually extract a decision, and the decision has to be extracted unless you have like a hung jury and then you postpone it for a little bit. But
So
the crux,
so the idea
I guess,
here,
like more to the real problem, because I was more thinking when I read this, like how mad is this going to make people? Our friends on the left who are like, we can't work within the system, we have to burn it down. And you may not like Zizek's analysis of it, but it's like when you get groups of individuals together, and his favorite examples, of course, are Occupy or the Yellow Vest movement. When you get enough individuals together, they're not really able to articulate what they want because there's too many individuals, too many interests pulling in different directions. And he extends this to political institutions where I don't know that he's exactly saying the only solution to this is a monarch. He's kind of just making the case that it's not insane to have the decision being the receiver of a bunch of expert opinions, and then the monarch doesn't have to know anything special. They don't have to be an exceptional human being. You just need someone to put the stamp A or B or C at the end. Anyway, all this to say, there is a real problem here, a problem that something like permanent resistance doesn't solve.
well, yeah, like Zizek says, what Hegel fears and why his fear is like super relevant to us today is, well, this is what Hegel fears: the direct rule of experts who justify their decisions with in brackets pseudoscientific reasons, which are incomprehensible to the majority of ordinary citizens. So he fears like a technocracy almost. In today's terms, it would be a kind of technocracy that Hegel's thinking here could be applied to, or even just vested interests more generally. But like people with expert knowledge justifying their decisions with reasons which the majority of people won't really understand. Like maybe an example of that, something arcane, like, the priesthood, was that idea like the priesthood of nuclear energy or something, like having like a council of nuclear physicists making decisions about like nuclear technology sharing and like what the difference between a nuclear weapons plant and a nuclear power facility is, and like and just sort of informing the government of their decisions. I guess that is sort of the situation today. Like we want to keep the technocrats away. So I guess the way to do that is to have this sort of monarch chosen by lot, because as Victor said, that would sort of keep it away from vested interests. But then the monarch would be sort of an everyday person who doesn't really understand all the reasons, except is the best way these experts can explain it to the monarch. And then the monarch will make a decision based on, I don't know, quote unquote, common sense rather than expert knowledge. Supposedly, then that common sense decision making as the back end would keep the expert with their pseudoscientific reasoning, their bamboozling would be kept to a minimum. So I don't know. Maybe that's the idea here. Or economic decisions is the next thing Zizek brings up too. So yeah, economists sort of making policy decisions as well. Yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah, and this is where calling it quote unquote something like a monarchy does a lot of work here, because it's actually nothing like a monarchy. There's no divine right, inheritance, the property that goes with that title. It's just an arbitrary decision maker that's supposed to prevent political constipation. So is the title, not the king title, but the article title, is this just to make leftists mad then? Like, come on, you can't say that this is what Hegel thought of the monarch, right? He wanted the Prussian king, he backed the Prussian king to be in charge of Germany, one of the Wilhelms or whatever, not the Austrian guy, because the Austrian guy was Catholic and Protestantism is a higher form of freedom. And I'm no Hegel expert, but that doesn't sound like Hegel's just pro-monarchy, so someone's making decisions. It sounds like he's a believer.
Yeah, exactly.
Schopenhauer said he was a lapdog of the state. So I'm just going to wager this is a Zizek take, not a Hegel take.
Well, if a president is elected and at the same time somehow has more power than a monarch, who would be either a hereditary monarch or ideally, I guess, a monarch chosen randomly, then the president, then that the president chosen by election could have some kind of vested interest behind that election, because, campaigning, financing, donations, blah blah blah, whatever. Those could bias the president, and the president then having more power than a monarch, which I guess to my ears means there's a constitutional monarchy, which sort of separates the monarch from the legislative assembly at least. And maybe it separates the monarch from the executive branch as well. I'm not sure. But somehow this president's going to have more power and be elected. So that brings in corruption possibilities. They're going to listen to their counselors and then decide on the decision that makes most sense for the donors. The monarch, not having that problem, supposedly, is going to listen to the decisions and make, just the best decision.
And is that what monarchies do or have done? What's even the point of saying monarchy when what's being argued is what you said earlier, Eric, I think is just right. This is just describing a one-man jury. That's what he wants. So a one-man jury.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess monarchy in general just means rule of one. But yeah, traditionally, as long as I can remember, monarch means, hereditary, family-based branches of families fighting with each other. And it gets into all that. The lottery system's not just going to be some kind of like, oh, everyone's going to accept that. No, it's going to be like George Bush Sr., then George Bush Jr., because we all know the senior, so we trust the Bushes now. Like there's going to be that kind of element of dynasty involved. Always. I don't know. But Lot would supposedly erase that. But then, is it a monarchy? I'm not sure. These are definitional problems, though. Like a rule of
we
one.
had the same problem with Moldbug.
Which problem?
Well, just like that, what he was describing was just like a Silicon Valley tech CEO. And it's like had nothing to do with hereditary rule, had nothing to do with like any like historical thing. He just wanted to call it a monarchy.
But then again, that'll be like a more of a bias towards the person who has the money, who can sort of maneuver themselves into getting elected. If it's chosen by lot, it would be then at least it could be bias. It could be anything, but at least it wouldn't be like, you couldn't game the system directly unless you could somehow steal the election, steal the lot.
Yeah.
All right. So then we get to a question of why this article. Because if this wasn't Zizek writing it, we never would have read this. If it was written,
doesn't even sound like Zizek.
I know, it's just so. Didn't we
like,
say that
not
about
even
the last article that we read by him? Like this just sounds like some.
Yeah, it sounds like someone else. It's like he's hired someone to ghostwrite for him.
Zizek's using ChatGPT to recycle the old Polish jokes from his previous books.
It's weird, but the argument does sound like something he would kind of say, because he's long been a skeptic of kind of like bottom up romantic notions of like direct action, right?
Could you talk about that for a bit? Because this is like your whole thing. And really, it sounds like he's going off on like a hard and negri, like permanent revolution.
Yeah.
Can you just reiterate that? Because we haven't talked about it in a while.
I mean, I'll answer it this way just to connect it back to Zizek, which I like. He kind of has this well-known talk that's on YouTube. I think it's called like a plea for like something like institutional radicalism or something like that, or I forget exactly what it is, but he's kind of like in Spain, I think, talking to all these like students who are probably really enthusiastic for bottom up, kind of in the wake of the financial crisis and all those movements that were happening in Southern Europe, Podemos and like Syriza in Greece and all these different kinds of like movements for direct action. And he was kind of saying, he had this whole bit about how, what does he say? He's like, could you imagine? Well, he's talking about alienated structures, and he's like, leftists, they kind of have this fantasy that, oh, if we just get rid of all the alienation between us and the decisions, right, then we can, like, all alienated structures need to be eliminated so that there's no gap between us and our decisions. And he kind of says, well, alienation's actually kind of good. Like, I kind of want alienation. He's like, could you imagine me at a meeting every day where we have to go discuss and decide, what are we going to do for the kindergarten for the children today? What are we going to do for like the water and the food? What are we going to do about education on this thing? And I think his exact quote is like, that would be hell for me. Right. And he's like, and I kind of agree with him. That would be hell for me too. I don't want to make those decisions. I don't need to know. And I think the way he describes it is like, I just want, we need a big bureaucracy that's alienated from us that just works well. It's like, that's so that I can be left to read my books and write my papers. And I don't want to need to be there. And he's like, I'm sorry. I know maybe some leftists will hate me, I think, for this, but he said, that's he's like, it's bad. He's like, the dream. He's like, alienation's that good, actually, sometimes. Right. And maybe this is a continuation of that argument. And I will say that I mostly agree with that. I mean, I don't want to fucking be at meetings all day. And I think there's an old saying in kind of like participatory democracy circles. And I think actually a political scientist, Francisca Paletta, wrote a famous book about participatory democracy in like American activism. And it's called Freedom is an Endless Meeting. Right. Yeah. And like, that's the kind of idea that like, if that's the kind of freedom you want, where it's just a meeting that never ends, it's like that's not good. Right. Like, who wants that? Someone just needs to make a decision already. Right. And like, it would be nice to have an opportunity if I need to know, but most of the time, like, most people don't need to know. Right. And it's like, so I think that's kind of, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where I see the continuation of Zizek coming into this, I guess, like, because I think this is a long-standing view that he's had, sort of. The monarchy thing is new, though.
The perpetual meeting thing I've heard before. Yeah.
And perpetual meeting is the same as like perpetual resistance. We can never
permanent
stop.
revolution.
It's permanent revolution. We got to show up every day. And look, like,
terrible. Who wants to live that way?
I don't got the lung capacity for that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, don't we have that already, though? Like, what if you have no power over politics, then you already do have that anyway. All he wants is just a bureaucracy that like works well.
That's accountable.
And the outcomes are actually like beneficial for everybody rather than just beneficial for a certain class or group.
Yeah. That's what I want too.
Yeah. Well, don't we all?
Do we all? There's some people on Twitter, I think, who'd be very happy to spend all their time debating in meetings.
Yeah, they want to be having a fucking circle jerk every day, talking about
how to best run the anarcho commune.
Exactly.
Well, there is a point to be made here. It still says Marxist in his bio, as I said, though there's no mention of how the rest. Obviously, it's an article. You can't mention everything. You can't write the entire plan for the future. But for example, who are the experts here? Because if some version of this were installed tomorrow, it might bring back the art of rhetoric, in the sense that it would now come down to which expert could best rhetorically sway the single dumb monarch. That would potentially be the same manufactured consent about which ideologue or which media company can best sway the dumb electorate. That's like, isn't this the opposite of the idea of communism insofar as there's like, I don't know, anything like class consciousness? Is there anything Marxist left here?
Well, what we have is the bad kind of bureaucracy where the decisions don't benefit everybody. And the other two options are either a perpetual decision-making process without a monarch, I guess, where nothing ever gets done because we're just in perpetual meetings. We're having meetings that establish like when the next meeting is going to be. And so we have to have a 2-hour meeting to vote on when we're actually going to have a meeting to discuss the things that are on the docket. Or
Well, Eric, I think
we have a bureaucracy that doesn't work very well.
I think you've actually articulated, or I think you've gotten to the really important point here, because I think the question is sort of, we all want that bureaucracy that works well, but I guess the question is like, is it the case that you need democracy for that to happen, right? Like, is democracy the thing that's going to deliver on that functional bureaucracy that gives everyone what they want, right? And a lot of people say, yeah, we need it, or at least some form of it, right? Zizek's kind of saying, well, yeah, we probably need part of it, but we also maybe need like a combination, right? Maybe we need a monarch to just make decisions when a fucking decision needs to be made or something like that. And then, so I think that there are some, and I would say for me, that's the important question. Because to me, I would say I am purely, I'm purely an instrumentalist about democracy. So to me, like, democracy is only good insofar as it can deliver something good. I don't care about democracy in itself. So like, but there are a lot of people, right? Maybe the people who love going to meetings all day, who love democracy in itself, right? They want to be at the meeting. They want to be like, they see something romantic in the decision-making process itself. To me, democracy is only interesting and important, like, insofar as it can protect us against really bad things and hopefully help us get good decisions. But the process itself is painful. You know, it's boring. It's like, you know, we should only use it insofar as it's actually going to get us something that we want. And I think maybe that's what Zizek's trying to put his finger on here a little bit.
And also,
Yeah.
the democracy as a master signifier pulls a lot of weight. I think we already did an episode on this.
Yeah.
Like, there's no such thing as real democracy. And even in Hegel's logical terms here, even if you ask every single person what they want about every decision, it's still not a democratic decision, right? It's still,
Exactly.
you have to universalize the majority over the minority. So never is anyone going to be totally happy.
Yeah.
So vibes-based question. Is this part of a post-political despondency? I don't want to think about this anymore. I don't want to argue about it anymore. Let's do thought experiments.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I don't see how this could be a model that would be specific to the left, but I mean, there could be a leftist version of this.
Yeah, one thing I got out of this is, if we're building a political system in our head, why not chance or randomness? Not to say anyone with political power would ever let that happen. They'd never let it on the ballot anywhere because that would fuck them. But no one's even really arguing for it except Victor. Because chance takes a lot of the power out of the interests that can just afford to buy all the nodes of a political system and every part of the decision-making process. So why don't we talk about chance more?
I mean, I don't know. I totally agree with you. I think that chance is, you know, that's what's beautiful about chance is, like, you know, no matter, even I'm just reminded of what Machiavelli said about Fortuna, right? It's like, you know, it's a kind of an unwieldy thing that is
Fortuna
impossible
is
to
a woman.
control. I mean, yeah, if you're a good leader, you can try to take advantage of opportunities that come up, but ultimately it's not controllable, right? And like, having some element kind of built in, institutionalized, where like people are going to get chosen in a random way that is just totally by chance and by luck. No one can, you know, game that unless they obviously corrupt the system itself. But like, assuming it's working the way it's supposed to, like that there's a checks and balances on it. Yeah, it protects us from those things. And I don't know why people don't talk about it. I mean, it's an old idea, right? Aristotle said in the Politics that Selecting people through elections is oligarchical, and whereas selecting people through lot is democratical, I believe is like the exact quote. So like it's a long-standing idea because Aristotle knew what he's admitting there is that elections, the people of more power and influence are going to end up winning elections, right? So it's oligarchical. Like so like whereas like if you just have it by chance, then literally everyone has an equal chance. So it's democratic.
You could try to make everybody so stupid that the stupidest of all outcomes would win in each case.
You're onto something there because again, it like the monarch is stupid. That is why. Like look at this thing and like the end of the second last paragraph. The king is a common man elevated into the top decider. More radically, we can even say that he is a member of the rabble, of those with no determinate place in the social hierarchy.
Is he talking about the
So
British royal family, or was I imagining that when like we're just obsessed with what did they pick for their garden? What did they wear to the ceremony?
Yeah,
and these are just like completely ordinary decisions
everyday
that
shit
anyone could make.
Oh yeah, because they are important people. We're interested in all those things. It's like celebrity culture. Because they're important, we're interested in what they're wearing. But with like, you're not interested in what your neighbor is wearing. You're not interested in how long ago they went to Old Navy to buy those fucking jeans. You're not interested in that stuff because they're not important people. I'm not entirely sure what the point of all that is except to say that the monarch chosen by lot is going to be just not somebody who's part of a dynasty, but they're just going to be a normal person, but elevated.
Yeah, that right there is the perfect description of the Hegelian syllogism, which is the universal in a particular.
That means the masters outside of the sort of expert knowledge system that comes up with the options that are going to be chosen sort of arbitrarily. So is that good? Is that a good thing? Yeah, here in the system it is. So there is an element of democracy in there. We have to elect our representatives. So there's always going to be a gap. The people aren't just directly represented in the legislative assembly. There's a gap there. The people are still excluded here.
The gap, real simply, is even if you asked each person what they want, you can't give every single person what they want. You can give the majority, you can give the people who own land, you can choose who to give what they want, but even if you asked everybody, you're not going to get the same result. So this is meant to fill or gloss over that gap.
And if each decision is arbitrary, then there's at least a better chance that like no specific group that is being represented in the legislative assembly is going to be favored. If the monarch is a normal person elevated to this position, making arbitrary decisions from outside of this sort of expert knowledge system, then that's going to guarantee that the decisions are at least, once you go through a bunch of decisions, what to do about the prison problem, what to do about climate change, what to do about, whatever. In the long run, it shouldn't favor any single group, which I guess would be a kind of good bureaucracy or a good government.
This is a frame that I've never really heard before, but if you are for democracy, you want chance to have an element in the system. You want to roll the dice. You want the D20 rather than predictable results. Because if you have predictable results, then the system's rife for being gamed. And that's what you can take out of this episode, RNG politics.
And I think we already covered the examples he gives, the yellow jackets. They didn't really know what they wanted. The UK elections of 2005, Tony Blair's very unpopular, but we didn't know what we wanted. Couldn't make a decision. Podemos became too political, cut off its horizons, and then didn't sort of know what it wanted. Because we are not actualized in the legislative assembly of elected representatives. We're actually actualized in the monarch.
That's where we need to fight. We need a direct action campaign around
Demanding chance.
Demanding chance.
Demanding a D&D.
A D20 democracy.
We're not radical Democrats. We are D20 Democrats.
I like that. I like that.
It's not bad. There's definitely worse
Not bad.
positions.
So that's what we have to contend with Zizek then. As somebody who says today something like monarchy is needed. And something like is in italics.
And something like is nothing like monarchy.
Yeah. something like but monarchy, but not really monarchy, but sort of like monarchy.
If it really were arbitrary, as he said, why would you need a person there anyway? You could just roll a die.
Yeah, it could be the monarch of dice. If we whittle it down to 6, then we roll a d6. You just need someone to whittle the decisions down in a fair and equitable way, apparently.
Mhm.
And then the d6 can be the monarch. We can, yeah.
It gives new meaning to amor fati. But isn't it sad? It's so sad to think that if we had a political system where, you know, once a month, once a year, we turn on our TVs, we tune in on our live streams, and the entire populace just watches someone roll a die to make political decisions for us. It's sad to think that this is a better political system than the one we currently have.
Yep.
All right, I think we stop it there. This has been PillPod.
I think it was productive.
This has been PillPod 171. I hope you had fun up Victor's back alley.
We've been up Victor's back alley.
To see more
Great.
of Victor's back alley, you'll have to join the Patreon, and I promise you, it's worth it. Anyway, that's us. That's it for us this week. Till next time.
Peace.
Later.